I froze when I saw them 20 HOA members sprawled across my pasture like they owned the place. Picnic blankets, champagne bottles, Bluetooth speakers, blasting pop music, and right in the center of it all stood her Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of our neighborhood. She waved at me with that smug grin, shouting, "It's Community Day, farmer, don't mind us." But I did mind, because that community meadow was my private property, 40 acres of farmland I'd worked on my whole life. And they'd just trampled through my gates without so much as a knock. I felt my blood boil under the midday sun as one of them tossed a beer can into my feed trough. I clenched my jaw, watching my herd in the distance, 35 massive bulls shifting restlessly behind the fence, snorting clouds of dust. They wanted a taste of country life. Fine. They were about to get the full-course meal. Before we get into the chaos that followed, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there, and if you've ever had a Karen step onto your land, hit subscribe. You're gonna love what comes next. I wasn't born a patient man. Life on a farm taught me patience, the kind you earn with cold mornings, stubborn gates, and animals that don't care about your schedule. But patience isn't the same as tolerance. There's a line between the two, a fence line, and that fence line is where the trouble started. My name's Cole. I'm 52, a widower, and the last patent still working the 40 acres my father cleared with a dozer and a broken back. The house is a squat white farmhouse with a tin roof that sings when it rains. The barn is older than me, a long, handsome beast of weathered wood steel trusses and the smell of hay baked into its bones. Out behind it stretched two pastures, south and east, dotted with water troughs and shaded by a stand of bur oaks. That's where my pride lives, 35 bulls, Angus and Charolais crosses built like freight cars, muscle stacked on muscle. Most days they behave like oversized dogs, lazy and dignified until someone waves something bright or the air itself feels wrong. On the far side of my north fence lies a development that sprang up like mushrooms after a rain, Willowbrook Estates, honey yellow houses, perfect lawns, SUV parade every morning at 8. And a homeowners association with rules for everything: paint colors, mailbox heights, acceptable tree species. My farm existed long before Willowbrook, but the day the first cul-de-sac touched my property line, I felt the temperature change. Some folks waved, some kept their heads down, and one woman eyed my barn like it was a stain on her silk blouse. Karen. I don't know her last name because she introduces herself only as Karen, HOA president. She's mid-40s, tan like it's her job, everything lacquered and polished from the helmet of blonde hair to the acrylic nails that could field dress a deer. Her voice carries even when you wish it wouldn't. The first time we met, she leaned over my fence and said, "You know, if you joined the HOA, we could help you modernize this rustic aesthetic." I told her I liked my aesthetic fine. That was 3 years ago. In those 3 years, Karen found a way to make my farm her problem. She called code enforcement because my barn lights were harsh at night during calving season. She filed a noise complaint about a tractor idling at 6 a.m. in hay time. She left a note on my mailbox asking me to move my antique Ford truck because it disturbed the property values of the street that dead ends at my fence. I filed each note in the circular cabinet under my sink and carried on. We got into a sort of rhythm. She nipped, I ignored. Then the nips got closer to the bone. She held a nature walk for the HOA kids and accidentally cut through my south gate, leaving it unlatched. I caught it before the bulls did. After that, I replaced my latches with heavy chain and a padlock you could anchor a boat with. I put up more signs: private property, no trespassing, livestock grazing, enter at your own risk. Karen called them hostile and unwelcoming. I told her that was the point. Thing about property lines is they're not philosophical, they're not metaphors, they're not community vibes, they're lines. If you were raised the way I was, crossing a line without permission buys you consequences you won't enjoy. My father had a simple rule: ask first, step second. It keeps calves off highways and men out of trouble. A week before the picnic, I noticed new activity on the Willowbrook Facebook group. My neighbor, thank you, who rents the house at the cul-de-sac and drinks beer with me, sometimes screenshotted posts and sent them over. Community Meadow Sunday, bring blankets and wine, scenic views by the barn, one read. Another, we'll finally use that open field, great for family photos. And a comment from the queen herself: don't worry, it's all arranged. Arranged with who? Certainly not with me. I walked my fence that Friday just like I walk it every Friday. You learn your land by the soles of your boots, where the ground goes soft near the creek, where wild turkey dust bath under the oaks, where wind cuts a straight path off the highway. I checked every staple, every post. I pulled at the gates and thanked yesterday's self for the thick chain. The sky stretched high and hard, a blue bowl you could drink from. The bulls stayed in the east pasture that day, rumbling in the belly the way bulls do, chewing, methodically flicking flies with tails wider than a belt. I've heard city folks say bulls are unpredictable like storms. They're not. They are precise animals with precise boundaries. You cross those boundaries with noise and chaos and foolish things, they'll remind you they weigh 1.5 tons. My boys don't want trouble, but if trouble comes in waving, shouting, and squeaking across a pasture like a box of rubber ducks, they'll answer. Saturday I drove into town for salt blocks and coffee. Everybody knows me at Grady's Feed and Tack. The clerk, a girl with a nose ring and boots older than she looks, said, "You see the HOA lady's planning some big to-do," I grunted. "You got cameras?" she asked. I nodded. "Good," she said. "People behave better when they know they're on film. Or worse. Either way, you'll have proof." On the way home, I passed the Willowbrook clubhouse and saw Karen organizing folding tables. A banner leaned against a tree, the kind of bubbly font you use when you want to pretend rules don't apply. Community Meadow Picnic. The word meadow bugged me. That's not a meadow. That's my east pasture. That's sweat and diesel and fence wire. Meadow is what you call it when you don't know what it costs. I spent the afternoon cleaning the barn breezeway, not because I expected guests, but because order calms me. I swept stacked bales, greased hinges, set out extra mineral tubs. I checked the waterers, ran my hands over the trough rims, tightened bolts. I worked until dusk, folded the edges of the fields into something softer. The cows lowed somewhere far off, and the bulls answered deep and satisfied. In the kitchen, I ate chili from a pot that had fed 3 generations and washed it down with black coffee. Then, I sat at the table and laid out my options like tools on a bench. Option 1, call the sheriff. The sheriff is an old friend who knows how Willowbrook operates. He'd send a car to caution them, and they'd go home grumbling about country people. It would fix today, not tomorrow. They'd be back the next sunny weekend bolder because they'd survived the lecture. Option 2, sue. Trespass. Nuisance. Interference with livestock. I could stack a legal mountain high enough to cast a shadow across their next board meeting. Lawsuits take time. In that time, Karen would host photo shoots on my fence and call it public art. Option 3, teach. Not with fists or fury, with gravity. With the simple fact that this land is not a set for their curated afternoon. I would keep it safe. I would keep it lawful. And I would make it unforgettable. I slept light like I do before a storm. At 4:30 I was up. I brewed coffee and stepped out onto the porch. The air had that tightness it gets when it's going to be hot by noon. A mockingbird practiced somebody else's song in the oak. I walked the fence again, sighing when I noticed fresh sneaker prints in the mud by the south gate. They'd scouted. Of course they had. I wiped the prints with my boot until the ground was only ground again. At sunrise, I called Miguel, my pasture manager, on Saturdays, a quiet man with hands like cedar bark. "Move the boys to east," I said. He whistled low. Today. Copy. We work in short sentences. He knows my tone when I mean it. He knows bulls, too. By 8, the herd stood behind the east fence line, heads down shoulder to shoulder like offensive linemen waiting for the snap. They weren't agitated. They were curious. 35 sets of eyes tracked the horizon, ears flicking at flies. I double-checked the interior gates, then walked the path to the main entrance that faces Willowbrook. I slid the chain through and left the lock in my pocket. The gate would swing just enough. In an emergency, I could open it in a second. That wasn't a trap. It was a lesson with a safety valve. I mounted 2 trail cameras, one in the oak above the east path, one tucked into the corner of the hay shed. Redundant angles. If this turned to court, there'd be no he said, she said. Only there it is. By 10, I heard the distant clap of pop music and the hum of happy voices. Willowbrook was assembling. "Thank you," texted. "They're bringing a bubble machine." And a DJ. Not kidding. I typed back one word, figures. I changed my shirt, wiped the dust from my boots, and leaned a shoulder on the porch post. When the first SUV nosed up to the cul-de-sac fence, I felt the same steady feeling I used to get as a younger man when I lined up a post hole digger over the chalk mark. The job would be done. The hole would be where the hole belonged. Then the post would stand and the fence would hold. You might think I was angry. I was earlier. But standing there with the heat rising and the bulls shifting like a tide behind the fence, I felt something colder and cleaner. It wasn't revenge. It was correction, a boundary reasserting itself. At 1042 by my phone, Karen appeared. White sundress, big hat, clipboard, megaphone, of course, a megaphone. She threw a perfect pageant smile across my pasture and announced, "Welcome to our community meadow." People clapped. Kids tumbled. Blankets bloomed like flags. A man in a salmon polo wrestled a pop-up tent into shape, while another uncorked a bottle with a dramatic pop. Someone squealed about the rustic aesthetic. Cameras clicked. Laughter climbed. Behind the east fence, 35 bulls raised their heads as one. "Boys," I said softly to nobody, and to them hold the line. I watched the crowd pour through the gap along my fence where they'd pushed the mesh aside weeks back. I watched noted memorized. I don't forget violations, I file them. The bulls huffed, one pawing dirt, not menacing, just stating facts. Karen tipped her hat at me across the distance and mouthed something I didn't need to hear to understand. Try and stop me. I didn't plan to stop her. I planned to let her stop herself. The sun crawled higher, the music louder, the laughter brighter. On my porch, the coffee went cool. In my pocket, the padlock was warm from my hand. Fine, I thought, watching Karen pose by my barn like a queen beside her castle. You want country, you'll get country, and you'll learn what fences are for. By noon, the sun was sitting right above the oaks, a burning coin melting into everything it touched. Heat shimmered off the dirt road, and even the fence wire looked like it was glowing. The smell of cut grass mixed with cheap perfume and grilled sausages drifted across my pasture like a bad omen. From the porch, I had a perfect view of what they were doing, Karen and her little entourage turning my land into their private country club. 20 of them at least, maybe more. They'd parked in a neat row right up against my fence line, blocking the service road that leads to my feed barn. Someone had set up a white tent with gold streamers. Kids were running through the grass, waving bright ribbons, and a speaker somewhere was blasting Taylor Swift like it was Coachella. Karen stood in the middle, a sun hat so wide it could have its own zip code. She was holding a glass of rosé and addressing the crowd through her megaphone, as if anyone beyond 3 feet cared. "Welcome everyone to Willowbrook's first annual Community Meadow Picnic," she shouted. The crowd cheered. "Thank you all for supporting our efforts to make our neighborhood harmonious and inclusive." I nearly choked on my coffee. Inclusive. That's one way to say trespassing. I decided to approach calmly, not as a man with rage boiling under his collar, but as the legal owner of this land. I walked the long way around through the south gate, taking my time. The bulls watched me pass. A few snorted, restless from the noise. When I got close enough, I called out, "Afternoon, folks." "Mind telling me what you're doing on my pasture?" Karen turned, flashing that fake HOA smile, the kind that could curdle milk. "Oh, Cole, we were just enjoying the sunshine. It's Community Spirit Day. Didn't you get the notice?" "Notice," I said. "You mean the one you posted on Facebook about my land?" She sipped her drink like she hadn't heard a thing. "Well, technically this area borders Willowbrook property. It's all open space, right? We thought you wouldn't mind." "Except it's fenced," I said flatly, "with a padlock. That you cut." A few people froze mid-bite. Others laughed nervously. A man in a pastel shirt mumbled, "Come on, buddy, it's just a picnic." "On private land," I said. "That's called trespassing." Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, please, no one's getting hurt. We're not damaging anything. Look around, it's beautiful. We're promoting the rural charm your property brings to the neighborhood." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You're promoting a lawsuit if you don't pack it up and leave." That made her laugh, really laugh. "Cole, honestly, you sound ridiculous. It's just grass. You should be thanking us. We're appreciating your farm, giving it visibility. Most people would kill for this kind of community engagement." I stared at her for a long second, trying to decide if she truly believed her nonsense or just liked hearing herself talk. Her friends smirked behind her, emboldened by the group. "That's how Karens work. They multiply confidence when they have an audience." "Visibility," I repeated. "You mean the way your guests just dumped plastic cups into my cattle trough?" Karen blinked, then turned to the group. "All right, everyone, let's move a bit further away from Farmer Cole's precious water." The crowd laughed. I felt my hand twitch, but I kept it in my pocket. I took out my phone and began recording. "Just so we're clear," I said, "you're all here without permission." Karen smirked at the camera. "Record all you want, cowboy. It's public land." "Oh, sweetheart," I said, smiling back. "You might want to check your maps before you start using legal terms." That was when a kid ran right through the shallow creek that separated the picnic area from the bulls' pasture, splashing mud everywhere. A few adults yelled for him to stop, but the noise and laughter drowned it out. The bulls lifted their heads, tails, flicking ears, twitching. I knew that sound, the heavy exhale, the low rumble in their throats. They weren't angry yet, but they were aware. Bulls don't like confusion. They don't like sudden movement. And they really don't like shrieking children waving red balloons. I took a breath. "Karen," I said evenly, "you're upsetting my animals. You need to go." "Oh, they're fine," she waved it off. "Look at them, they're just standing there. Harmless, really. Besides, it's fenced." "Right," I said quietly, "for now." I turned around and walked back toward my porch. Karen called after me, "Don't be such a grump, come grab a drink, lighten up a little," but I didn't answer. I just kept walking, the camera still rolling in my hand. When I reached the house, I went straight to the office, opened my laptop, and began uploading the video to a folder labeled HOA Evidence, Trespassing. Then I opened the feed from my security cameras. Every angle of the chaos was captured perfectly: the tent, the kids, the beer cans, and Karen twirling like she owned the place. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the faint echo of music drifting through the open window. My anger wasn't sharp anymore. It was quiet, cold, and heavy, like a storm cloud forming on the horizon. When Miguel stopped by later to drop off feed invoices, I showed him the footage. He chuckled low. "They really think they can do that. They just did," I said. "What you gonna do?" I looked out the window at the bulls grazing peacefully under the sunday. "I'm going to let them hang themselves with their own rope." That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Karen's smug grin. I saw her glass of rosé catching the light as if it were a trophy. I saw the kids climbing over the fence like it was playground equipment. My fence. My line. By morning, I had my plan. It didn't involve yelling or lawsuits or even the sheriff, at least not yet. It involved letting nature take care of what arrogance started. I spent the early hours walking the field, checking the perimeter again. I tightened every lock except one, the north gate. That one I left open just a crack wide enough for a few curious bulls to wander through if the need arose. I filled the troughs near the east pasture, right beside the picnic spot, so the herd would drift that way naturally. Karen's people wanted an authentic rural experience. They were going to get it, just not the way they imagined. Later that afternoon, I saw Karen's newest post on the HOA group. It was a collage of photos from the picnic people posing in front of my barn, kids playing with my dogs, someone sitting on my tractor seat. The caption read, "A successful community event. Huge thanks to Farmer Cole for letting us use his land again." Again. That word did it. The comments were even worse. "Such a perfect location, Karen. You should make it annual. I can't believe he's so chill about it. Love having a farmer next door." I wasn't chill. I was calculating. The next time they came, they wouldn't find a friendly farmer or an empty field. They'd find the real Willowbrook Welcome Committee, 35 muscular, territorial, 1,000-pound bulls with no patience for uninvited guests. I picked up my phone and called Miguel. "Miguel," I said, "keep the boys close to the east fence next weekend." He hesitated. "You expecting company?" Unfortunately, I said yes, but this time I'm not serving drinks. When I hung up, I looked out across the fields. The sun was sinking low, painting the sky red and gold. The bulls stood in silhouette, tails, swishing bodies glistening with sweat and dust. They looked like soldiers waiting for a signal. I raised my glass of water to them and muttered, "Soon, boys, real soon." I thought maybe, just maybe, the embarrassment from last weekend would have knocked some sense into Karen. Most people would have realized they'd crossed a line and backed off. But Karen wasn't most people. She was the kind of person who'd burn her hand on a stove and then sue the manufacturer for making it hot. By Tuesday morning, I woke up to a buzzing phone. My friend Thank You, my reluctant informant inside Willowbrook, had sent me a dozen screenshots. Karen had turned the picnic into a full-blown PR campaign. The HOA Facebook page was plastered with posts. Our community picnic was a massive success. Nature, laughter, and friendship. Thank you everyone for making Willowbrook such a beautiful place to live. And at the bottom of every post, like a brand, signature, she'd tagged me number, thanks Farmer Cole number, community spirit number, rural charm. She even uploaded a photo of herself standing in front of my barn with her hand on her hip, grinning like she'd just purchased the place. The caption read, "Our neighborhood meadow is finally being appreciated. Stay tuned for our next outdoor event." I stared at my phone for a long minute, the kind of silence that only happens right before something breaks. It wasn't just arrogance now, it was provocation. At 10 sharp, I marched across the gravel road that separates my land from Willowbrook. My boots crunched like gunfire against the stones. I didn't bother to knock when I reached the HOA office. The glass door swung open to reveal a pastel nightmare, white walls, fake plants, motivational posters about unity and community harmony. Behind the reception desk, Karen sat like a queen behind her throne, laptop, open phone in hand, sunglasses perched on top of her hair. She looked up, and her smile froze into something polite and poisonous. "Well, if it isn't our local celebrity," she said brightly. "Come to thank me for the publicity." "Publicity," I repeated, taking off my hat. "You mean trespassing, vandalism, and slander." "Oh, don't be dramatic," she said, leaning back in her chair. "Everyone loved it. You should see the engagement we're getting online. It's bringing value to both our properties." "I didn't agree to any of this," I said. "You cut my fence. You brought people onto private land. You left trash bottles and God knows what else. You had no right. Karen sighed, pretending to look bored. Cole, you have to understand. Community development is about sharing. You have this huge empty field sitting there doing nothing. We're just utilizing it. Besides, you didn't explicitly say no. Yes, I said, my voice hardening. I did. Several times. Well, she said with that fake laugh that made my skin crawl, maybe you should put it in writing next time. She stood up, straightening her skirt. Look, the picnic was harmless. No one got hurt. You're just upset because people enjoyed something that you think you own. Maybe you need to loosen up a bit. I took a step closer to her desk, lowering my voice. I do own it, Karen. Every inch of it. The county records the deeds, the taxes, it's all mine. And next time you set foot on my land, I won't be so friendly. Her eyebrows shot up. Is that a threat? No, I said calmly. It's a promise. For a second I saw it, the flicker of fear behind her smug exterior. But she recovered fast, her tone dripping with condescension. I'll make sure to tell the HOA board you tried to intimidate me. They'll love that. Maybe we'll add verbal harassment to our next complaint. Complaint, I asked, raising an eyebrow. Oh yes, she said sweetly. I was just drafting one. About your signage. Those big red private property signs, they're quite aggressive. They make our neighborhood look hostile. We'll be requesting that you take them down. I let out a slow breath. You really don't know when to stop, do you? Karen smiled, eyes glinting. Oh, I do. I stop when things are pretty. I walked out before I said something I'd regret. Outside, the sun hit me like a slap. My blood was boiling so hot I could feel it in my teeth. By the time I got home, my plan wasn't just forming, it was fully built. For years I'd tolerated her nonsense because I believed in keeping peace. Because my late wife used to tell me, you can't fight crazy with anger, Cole. You'll just lose twice. But this wasn't about anger anymore. This was about respect. And if Karen wouldn't learn through words, she'd learn through experience. That afternoon, I began preparing. I checked the east fence line, the one closest to Willowbrook, and replaced the wire with reinforced mesh. The only gate I left even slightly loose was the north one, the same one Karen's group used last time. I tightened every other lock and oiled the hinges so they'd swing fast when I needed them to. Then I called Miguel. Remember those 35 bulls, I said. He chuckled. Hard to forget them, boss. I want them in the east pasture by Saturday morning. Keep them well fed but restless. No contact with outsiders. I'll handle the rest. There was a pause. You expecting trouble again? Let's just call it a community event, I said. He laughed low and long. Understood. Next, I set up the cameras, 3 of them this time, with higher resolution. One facing the main gate, one overlooking the pasture, and one hidden in the barn loft for a full aerial shot. I didn't just want proof. I wanted documentation. If Karen thought she could manipulate the narrative again, I'd make sure the footage spoke louder than her Facebook posts. By evening, the sun turned the fields into liquid gold. The bulls shifted in their pens, restless, powerful, snorting against the rails. I walked among them, patting their thick necks, feeling the tension in their muscles. They'll come again, I told them quietly. And when they do, you boys just be yourselves. They blinked at me, calm and silent, chewing hay like philosophers who already knew the outcome. 2 days later, the first signs appeared literally. Karen had printed flyers, Willowbrook Summer Picnic, Saturday at noon, same beautiful meadow. There it was again, meadow. As if calling it something softer could erase the fence line, the property rights, or basic decency. I watched her and her crew pin the flyers around the subdivision like they were campaigning for office. I could have laughed if it wasn't so infuriating. That Friday night I went through my final checklist, cameras armed and recording. Gates locked except the one that mattered. Bulls fed, watered, and ready. Before heading in, I paused by the fence. The stars were clear, glittering like salt scattered across the dark. The air was heavy with the smell of hay and summer heat. Somewhere far off, a bull bellowed a deep primal sound that echoed through the still night. That's right, boys, I murmured. Tomorrow's your showtime. When I went to bed, the last thing I saw was the glow of my security monitor in the corner. 3 small rectangles of silence waiting to explode into motion. Saturday dawned bright and cruel. The kind of day where the heat hits you before the sun even clears the tree line. At 10:30 I saw the first cars pulling up. SUVs, convertibles, even a rented food truck this time. They were doubling down bigger than before. I leaned on my porch rail, arms crossed, coffee steaming in my hand. Karen arrived, last stepping out of her Mercedes like a movie star. Her voice cut across the field, full of false joy. Good morning, neighbors. Isn't this just perfect? The crowd cheered. I smiled. Not the polite kind, the slow, dangerous kind that comes from knowing you're about to teach someone a lesson they'll never forget. Because this wasn't a picnic anymore. This was a showdown. Saturday morning came in quiet, heavy, and hot. The kind of morning that makes every sound feel louder, every breath thicker. I was up before dawn watching fog crawl low across the field like a living thing. The dew shimmered silver on the grass, and for a few peaceful minutes everything was calm. My kind of morning. Then in the distance I heard the rumble of tires. The piece shattered like glass. I took a slow sip of coffee and set the cup down. Showtime, I murmured. By 8 o'clock, Willowbrook was alive with noise. Cars lined the cul-de-sac, kids shouting, trunks slamming, folding chairs, clattering. The HOA's second community meadow picnic was about to begin, and this time they were better organized. Karen had gone full event planner, banners, coolers, balloons, even a bounce house, half inflated near the fence. But she still hadn't learned the one lesson I'd been waiting to teach. Never underestimate a man who knows every inch of his land. I checked my cameras, 3 of them streaming perfectly. The main one caught the cul-de-sac entrance, the second covered the east pasture, and the third was perched high in the barn, giving me a cinematic wide shot of the battlefield. I almost wished I'd brought popcorn. Then I headed out to the east pasture to meet the stars of the day, 35 bulls, restless, strong, and snorting steam in the morning light. They were magnificent, each one nearly a ton of muscle horns, curved like question marks waiting for an answer. Miguel was already there, leaning against the fence with a smirk. "You sure about this, boss?" I grinned. "Completely." He nodded toward the herd. "They're ready. They've been pacing since sunrise." I walked along the fence line, running my hand across the metal gate. The chain was thick and heavy, except for the north gate. That one was only looped, not locked. The latch would hold for now, but swing open easy when I needed it to. The setup was simple, almost poetic. Every other gate around the property was padlocked tight, every potential exit sealed. The only opening was the narrow north gate where the HOA crowd always crossed. Once they entered, they'd be boxed in no easy way out. I'd be nearby watching, waiting for the perfect moment. It wasn't vengeance I wanted, it was clarity. I'd given Karen enough warnings. She didn't respect fences, so today she'd learn why those fences existed. Miguel handed me the remote for the cameras. "Want me to stay?" "No," I said. "You go home. I'll call when the dust settles." He gave a low whistle. "You think it'll get that bad?" I smiled. "Depends on how fast they can run." By 10:30 I heard laughter drifting across the pasture. I stepped up onto my porch with the binoculars. They were back and bigger than ever. Over 30 people this time, adults in straw hats, women in sundresses, kids chasing a beach ball that bounced dangerously close to my fence. Karen naturally was at the center of it all, megaphone in one hand, mimosa in the other. "Good morning, Willowbrook," her voice blared, echoing through the air. "Welcome to our second annual community picnic. Let's make today even better than last week." I couldn't help but chuckle. The arrogance was almost impressive. I watched her wave at the crowd like a politician, posing for photos beside my barn, gesturing at the field like she was giving a tour of her estate. "Don't go too far," she called to the kids. "Stay near the meadow." The meadow. That word again? One little girl pointed at the fence where a few bulls were grazing lazily nearby. "Look, Mommy, big cows," Karen smiled, squinting into the Sunday. "Oh, they're harmless. Farmers keep them for decoration or something." Miguel would have fallen over laughing if he'd heard that. 35 bulls, each one capable of flipping a car, and she thought they were decoration. I grabbed my phone and texted, "Thank you, me. How bad is it over there?" "Thank you, 30 cars, maybe more." Karen says she's planning a speech at noon, something about unifying property lines. Me perfect. I leaned back, set my coffee aside, and waited. The sun climbed higher, burning the fog away. The field shimmered with heat, the grass swaying gently under the weight of the day. My bulls were growing restless, shifting and snorting tails flicking in irritation at the noise. I knew that sound, low rumbling, almost like thunder rolling under the earth. The kind of sound that means, not yet, but soon. At exactly 1158 I made my move. I walked calmly down the porch steps, through the side gate, and toward the main field. From a distance I must have looked like any farmer checking his fence. Karen spotted me almost immediately. "Oh, look who's here," she shouted through her megaphone, grinning. "Farmer Cole, come join us. We saved you a seat." I smiled back and waved lazily. "Thanks, but I'll stay right here." "Oh, don't be shy," she called, raising her drink. "You're part of the community, too." I let my voice carry across the field. "You sure about that?" A few people laughed, thinking it was a joke. Then I walked up to the north gate, the one I'd left loose. I grabbed the latch, flipped it open, and stepped back. The metal creaked softly, the sound of a promise about to be kept. Karen frowned. "What are you doing?" "Just feeding my bulls," I said, raising my voice enough for the cameras to catch every word. "They get territorial when strangers trespass." I could see her smirk falter for the first time. The crowd went quiet as a few of the bulls lifted their heads, nostrils flaring. A hush rippled across the picnic like a chill wind. Karen laughed nervously. "Oh, stop trying to scare us, Cole. They're behind the fence." I smiled. "Not anymore." Then I gave a low whistle. The sound echoed across the pasture. 35 bulls turned toward me, massive bodies, shifting hooves digging into the earth. Dust swirled around them like smoke from a cannon. One of them let out a deep rolling bellow that shook the air. Karen froze. "Oh my God, are they coming this way?" I didn't answer. I just took a slow step back. The first bull started trotting, then another, 35 mountains of muscle breaking into a slow, steady run. The ground trembled under their weight. The picnic tables rattled. A few wine glasses tipped over. The crowd screamed. "Run!" someone shouted. Chaos exploded like fireworks. People scattered in every direction, grabbing kids, stumbling over chairs, tripping on blankets. The bounce house collapsed as two men tried to dive through it at once. Karen dropped her megaphone and bolted toward the gate, only to find it swinging halfway shut, the chain looped tight. She pounded on it, screaming, "Open the gate, open it!" I leaned on the fence, calm as a preacher watching it all unfold. The bulls didn't touch anyone, they just charged close enough to send a clear message. Dust flew, picnic food launched into the air, champagne bottles shattered under their hooves. One of Karen's friends lost a shoe. Another dove headfirst into a cooler. When the bulls slowed, snorting and pawing the ground, I finally walked over and unlatched the gate. "Easy, boys," I said softly. "Show's over." The herd stopped a few yards away, breathing hard, eyes glinting in the sunlight. Karen stumbled past me, face, red hat gone, dress streaked with mud. She turned, pointing a shaking finger. "You could have killed us," I tilted my head. "You said it was your community meadow, remember? My bulls were just mingling with the neighbors." Behind her, the remaining guests limped away, dragging their coolers and dignity with them. The field was littered with food confetti and shattered glass. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. She just glared, trembling with humiliation. I smiled. Next time Karen read the sign. I pointed at the freshly painted warning nailed to the fence post, "Private property. Trespassers will be charged." And just below it in smaller letters, I'd added that morning, "and chased." The sound was something you never forget, the ground itself roaring. It started like distant thunder, a low tremor, then grew into a full-body vibration that rattled teeth and turned the air into something alive. 35 bulls in motion aren't just animals. They're a moving landscape, a storm made of flesh and fury. From my porch, the sight was biblical. Dust clouds lifted behind them, sunlight slicing through the haze like golden fire. Karen's elegant community picnic had transformed into a full-scale evacuation scene straight out of an apocalypse movie. It all happened in seconds. The first bull, a massive black Angus I called Diesel, burst through the open north gate, followed by the rest of the herd in a formation so tight it looked choreographed. They weren't violent. They were curious and territorial, driven by instinct and the smell of strangers, food, and noise. But to the screaming crowd, they might as well have been charging demons. Karen was the first to run. So much for leadership. She dropped her wine glass and bolted toward the fence, her white sundress whipping in the wind, her expensive sandals slapping against the dirt. Behind her, chaos unfurled like a comedy reel played at double speed. A man in a floral shirt dove behind a folding table. Two teenagers grabbed a cooler and tried to use it as a shield. Someone tripped over a blanket and face-planted into a fruit platter. Kids shrieked, parents screamed their names, and the air was thick with dust and panic. Diesel trotted right through the center of the picnic, snorting at a cluster of helium balloons. One popped, and the whole herd jumped. Chairs went flying. Wine spilled like blood across the grass. The bulls began circling, forming a loose ring around the terrified trespassers, tails twitching, hooves stamping in warning. From the edge of the field, I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not a mean laugh, but one of those deep, unstoppable "Lord, have mercy, what am I watching?" laughs that come when justice finally takes the stage. "Lights, camera, karma," I whispered, clicking my phone's camera to record. One woman, clearly a city dweller, waved her hands frantically and shouted, "Don't they know we're human?" A bull answered with a snort so loud it echoed off the barn walls. Another lowered his head, slightly pawing the dirt. Not a full charge, just a warning shot across the bow. That was enough. The crowd screamed again and rushed toward the only exit they knew, the north gate. But when they reached it, they found the chain looped tight, the padlock gleaming in the sunlight. "Open it," someone yelled. Karen threw herself at the fence, rattling it like a prisoner in a cage. "Open the gate, you psycho." I leaned casually on the fence post a few yards away, arms crossed, calm as Sunday morning. "You said this was community property," I called back. "So, enjoy the community." "They're going to kill us," she screamed, mascara streaking down her face. I smiled. "Nah, they're just socializing." Behind me, Diesel huffed and stomped, his breath steaming in the sunlight. He wasn't angry, just making sure everyone knew who was boss. The rest of the bulls mirrored him, forming a semicircle that penned the group tighter. Someone tried to climb the fence but slipped, landing flat on their back with a grunt. Another man started yelling at Karen. "You said it was safe. You said the farmer was fine with it," Karen snapped. "Shut up, Greg. Just shut up. The site was too rich." HOA royalty covered in mud, screaming at her own people, while 35 bulls stared her down like a jury of rural gods. "All right, boys," I said under my breath. "Time to cool off." I pulled a small air horn from my belt, something I used for feeding time, and pressed it once. The sharp sound cut through the chaos like a knife. Instantly, the herd slowed, turning their heads toward me. They knew the signal. One by one, the bulls stopped their posturing and began to drift back toward the open field, huffing, snorting, leaving a trail of trampled grass and shredded ego behind. I walked to the gate, slow and steady, the camera still rolling in my other hand. When I reached Karen, she looked like a wreck hare, wild sunglasses gone, dress torn at the hem. Her pristine HOA confidence had evaporated. I unclipped the chain, swung the gate open, and stepped aside. "After you," I said politely. She hesitated, chest heaving. "You're insane," she hissed. Maybe I said, smiling. "But my bulls are law-abiding citizens." "Can't say the same for your HOA." The group flooded through the opening, tripping and stumbling, dragging coolers, strollers, and bits of picnic debris. One man left behind a pair of expensive loafers. Another lost his phone somewhere in the grass. The last kid out was crying, clutching a half-deflated balloon that read, "Community Fun Day." When the dust settled, only Karen remained on my side of the fence, standing in front of me, trembling with rage. "You'll pay for this," she spat. "You terrified children. You endangered lives." I tilted my head. "You mean trespassers." She jabbed a finger toward me. "I'm calling the police." "This is assault," I shrugged. "Please do." "I've got 8 cameras rolling, and about 20 witnesses admitting they were on my land without permission. I'm sure the sheriff would love to hear your version." For once, she didn't have a comeback. Her face twisted between fury and humiliation, and for a split second I almost pitied her. Almost. "Go home, Karen," I said quietly, "and take your circus with you." She glared at me one last time, then turned and stormed off through the gate, stepping right into a puddle of mud. The squelching sound was poetic. When she was gone, I let out a long breath and leaned against the fence. The bulls were already back to grazing calm as monks. Diesel flicked his tail at a fly and looked at me like he was asking, "Did we do good?" "You did just fine," I said, patting the fence post. I spent the next hour cleaning up the battlefield. Broken wine glasses, soggy sandwiches, a few designer handbags that nobody dared to come back for. I tossed the trash into bins and snapped a few more photos for evidence. Every bit of it, proof of trespass, proof of negligence, proof of Karen's arrogance, turned to dust. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat on the porch watching the replay on my laptop. The footage was cinematic, perfect framing, perfect chaos. The herd sweeping across the field, the HOA members scrambling Karen, screaming at the top of her lungs. If I ever wanted to make a public service announcement about why you respect property lines, this was Oscar material. "Thank you," texted me not long after thank you. "The neighborhood group is melting down. People are furious. Some want to sue Karen. Others are demanding she resign. Me, tell them to bring snacks next time. Thank you. You're evil." Me, nah, just efficient. For the first time in weeks, I slept like a man who'd reclaimed his peace. The next morning, the local sheriff showed up. Big guy, mustache thick enough to hide a family of birds. He tipped his hat. "Morning, Cole. Got a call from Willowbrook saying you tried to murder them with livestock." I couldn't help but grin. "You see the footage," he chuckled. "Yep, looks like you just opened a gate and let nature take its course." "Exactly." He nodded. "No crime in that. But I'm going to have to ask for copies of the video just to make it official." "Already printed and labeled," I said, handing him a flash drive. "And Sheriff, make sure Karen gets a copy too." He laughed, shaking his head. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic, Cole." "Just doing my civic duty," I said. By noon, word spread faster than wildfire. The HOA group chat exploded with outrage memes and accusations. Someone leaked the video clip online, and it went viral locally within hours. The headline from the community paper read, "Bulls of Justice Farmers Livestock Sends HOA Picnic Running for the Hills." I couldn't have written it better myself. From my porch, I watched as Karen's car drove past slowly, windows up, head down. The queen had fallen, and her kingdom was now a punchline. I raised my coffee mug to the bulls grazing peacefully in the field. To you, gentlemen, I said, the real heroes of Willowbrook. Diesel lifted his head, snorted once, and went back to chewing. And just like that, the farm was quiet again. Peace restored, not by lawyers, not by threats, but by 35 bulls, and a lesson no HOA will ever forget. By Monday morning, the story had spread like wildfire through every corner of Willowbrook and beyond. The local paper had picked it up first, but by the end of the day, I'd seen clips on social media titled HOA Picnic Gone Wild and Farmers' Bulls Teach HOA a Lesson in Property Law. Someone had even edited dramatic background music to my footage, and the comment section was a battlefield of opinions. Half the town was cheering me on. The other half, led by Karen's die-hard loyalists, were howling for justice. I didn't have to wait long for the official response. At around 9 a.m., a white SUV pulled into my driveway. 2 sheriff's deputies stepped out, followed by none other than Karen herself, dressed in black this time like she was attending her own funeral. Her hair was pulled tight, sunglasses hiding her eyes, lips pursed in that permanent "I'm the victim" line she wore so well. "Morning, Cole," the sheriff said, tipping his hat as he approached. "Got a complaint we gotta talk through." I kept my tone polite but cool. "Of course. You folks want coffee. The pot's fresh." Karen let out a small scoff, muttering, "Unbelievable." The sheriff ignored her and gestured toward the porch. "Let's just sit and get this done." We sat across from each other at the old cedar table I built years ago, the one with coffee stains that looked like battle scars. The sheriff opened a notepad, and Karen sat ramrod straight beside him, clutching a binder full of documents like a legal weapon. "Mrs. Linton here says you intentionally endangered her and her guests by releasing livestock," the sheriff began. "Claims you caused panic and property damage." Karen leaned forward, voice trembling with indignation. "He opened the gate and let 35 bulls chase us. Children were screaming. We could have been killed." I took a slow sip of my coffee and smiled. "Did you mention that you were trespassing on private property?" Her face went red. "We didn't know it was private. The fence, the locked gate, the warning signs, and the no trespassing notice I filed with the county disagree," I said calmly. The sheriff turned a page in his notes. "We've reviewed the footage, Karen. You and your group were clearly inside his property lines. You even posted about it online." "That was," she stammered, "that was for community engagement." I raised an eyebrow. "Community engagement doesn't usually involve breaking locks and harassing livestock." Karen slammed her binder shut. "This is outrageous. You're all against me. This man terrorized innocent people." The sheriff sighed, rubbing his temples. "Karen, you're lucky nobody got hurt. Otherwise we'd be talking about criminal negligence on your part." Her jaw dropped. "My part, yep," he said, flipping his notebook around to show her a copy of my property map highlighted in bright yellow. "That's Cole's land. You and your crew trespassed, caused damage to his fence, and disturbed livestock. That's a misdemeanor trespassing charge right there." Karen's voice cracked. "But he set us up." I smiled. "Actually, I just opened a gate. The bulls did the rest. Nature's funny that way." The sheriff closed his notebook and stood. "Look, here's what's going to happen. The HOA is going to cover the cost of your fence repairs and cleanup, Cole. Karen, you're also facing a civil fine for unauthorized entry. I suggest you let the lawyers handle the rest." Karen's face was white as chalk. "You can't fine me. I am the HOA." The sheriff gave her a tired look. "Not anymore, you're not. The board voted this morning to remove you. Got the call on my way here." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time since I'd known her, Karen looked small. After they left, the silence felt enormous. The bulls grazed in the distance, calm and oblivious to the storm they'd just survived. I leaned back in my chair, letting the satisfaction sink in, not gloating, just closure. By Tuesday, the HOA officially issued a written apology. I had it framed above my desk. The Willowbrook Homeowners Association extends its sincerest apologies to Mr. Cole Patton for the recent misunderstanding regarding property boundaries. We regret any inconvenience caused and affirm our commitment to respecting local landowners and private property laws. It was written like a PR statement, but I didn't care. The victory wasn't in the apology, it was in the fact that they had to write it. Then came the legal side. My lawyer, a small-town pit bull named Edna, filed a civil suit for damages: broken fence section $2 $400, cleanup and disposal $1 $100, livestock disturbance compensation $7 $000, legal fees $3 $800, total $14 $300. Karen tried to fight it. She showed up at mediation with a new lawyer, young guy, slick hair, city shoes that had never touched mud. He tried to argue emotional distress. Edna leaned forward and said, "Your client's emotional distress came from her own stupidity, not my client's bulls." Case closed in 10 minutes. The HOA insurance paid out within a month. I used part of the settlement to replace my entire east fence with reinforced steel posts and an automatic locking gate. On top of it, I added a brand new sign that read, "Private property, no trespassing. Bulls still live here." A week later, I got a letter in the mail, anonymous, but the handwriting gave it away. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. I hope you're proud. You won't scare me forever." No return address, of course. I pinned it to the fridge like a trophy. But something had changed in Willowbrook. People started waving again. The same folks who used to glare at me for parking my tractor near the road now offered a friendly nod or a quick morning coal. Some even stopped by the fence to chat about local markets or weather. Respect was back-earned, not demanded. And Karen, she disappeared from sight. Rumor had it she'd sold her house and moved 2 towns over. The new HOA president, a quiet man named Dan, sent me a handwritten note. "Thank you for setting the boundaries literally and figuratively." Willowbrook's learning what community actually means. I kept that one too. Then one evening, about a month after everything settled, I got a call from the sheriff. "Thought you'd want to know," he said. "The county used your footage for a safety seminar on property rights and rural trespassing." I laughed. "You're kidding." "Nope." Title slide says, "Respect the fence lessons from Willowbrook." I almost spit out my beer. "You tell him to use the bull footage," he chuckled. "Oh, they did. It's effective." I went to bed that night feeling lighter than I had in years. No HOA threats, no angry letters, no entitled voices trying to tell me what to do with land my family had bled for. Just the sound of crickets, the wind brushing through the oaks, and the distant low of my bulls under the stars. Before I turned in, I looked out across the pasture. The fence line shimmered silver in the moonlight, strong, unbroken. Diesel stood near the water trough head high, watching me the way he always did. "Good work, partner," I said softly. "You earned your keep." He blinked once, snorted, and went back to grazing. For the first time in a long time, I knew peace had come back to the farm, not because I'd fought fire with fire, but because I'd reminded the world what a boundary meant. And I had 35 bulls to thank for it. A month later, the fields had gone quiet again. The grass that Karen's army trampled was already growing back greener than before. You could still see faint tire marks near the north gate, like scars, but they were fading fast. Nature has a way of healing faster than pride. I stood at the fence one morning, coffee steaming in my hand, watching Diesel and the other bulls graze lazily under the sunrise. The world looked clean again, orderly calm, the kind of morning my father used to call honest. Peace on a farm isn't just silence, it's a rhythm. The wind through the trees, the hum of distant insects, the slow chew of livestock. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed it until the HOA circus was gone. Since the incident, Willowbrook had transformed. The new HOA president, Dan, was a decent guy, a retired postal worker with a sense of humor and, more importantly, humility. He stopped by once with his wife to bring a basket of baked goods and an apology in person. "We've been trying to rebuild trust," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Karen left a big mess behind." I laughed softly. "Yeah, she did. But you're handling it better than I expected." He smiled. "I told the board there's a difference between leading and controlling. We're rewriting half the bylaws now. Less about power, more about people. That's a start," I said. "And the picnic idea," he chuckled. "Strictly within the HOA park from now on. 0 bulls involved." We both laughed at that. After they left, I pinned his thank you card on my fridge right next to the official apology letter from the HOA. Underneath, I taped a new photo, a still shot from my camera footage, where Diesel stood tall in the middle of the chaos dust, swirling around him, looking every bit like a sheriff handing down divine justice. I titled it, "The Day Common Sense Returned." The video, meanwhile, had taken on a life of its own. Someone uploaded it to YouTube, and within weeks it had racked up over 1 million views. The comments section was a festival of praise, memes, and rural solidarity. Don't mess with farmers. HOA Karens finally getting what they deserve. The bulls are the real heroes here. I didn't make a dime off it, but I didn't need to. Knowing that people saw the truth, that felt like enough. Every now and then, someone new would drive past, slowing their car to snap a photo of the infamous sign I'd put up, "Private property, no trespassing, 35 bulls still live here." The local paper even asked to interview me for a human interest piece. I agreed as long as they promised not to dramatize it. The reporter, a young guy with nervous energy, showed up with a notepad and camera. "So, Mr. Patton," he began, "what made you decide to, let the bulls handle things?" I grinned. "Didn't let them. I just gave them the opportunity to express themselves." He laughed nervously, jotting it down. "Would you say you were seeking revenge?" I shook my head. "Revenge is loud and ugly. What I wanted was understanding. I gave them the chance to understand the meaning of offense." He paused, looking thoughtful. "Do you think they learned it?" I glanced at the horizon. "Oh, they learned it. Some lessons you don't forget, especially when taught by 35 bulls." The article came out a week later, under the title, "When Common Sense Has Horns Farmer Teaches HOA Respect the Hard Way." It went statewide by the next weekend. My mailbox filled with letters from people, farmers, veterans, even suburban homeowners sharing their own stories about boundary issues and entitled neighbors. Some were funny, some were heartbreaking. One woman from Texas wrote, "You reminded me of my dad. He always said, you can't build fences tall enough for arrogance, but you can sure make 'em regret climbing over." That one hit me right in the gut. Because underneath all the humor, all the viral fame, all the cheering strangers online, there was something deeper. A truth that city folks and HOA committees often forget: boundaries aren't aggression, they're respect. When my wife was alive, she used to say that fences don't divide good people, they protect good neighbors from bad ones. She was right, and Karen had proven it in every possible way. Speaking of Karen, I hadn't seen her since that day she stormed off in the mud. But rumor travels fast in a small county. "Thank you," told me she tried to start another HOA board 2 towns over, lasted 3 weeks before the community voted her out. Some people just can't survive without conflict. It's their oxygen. Me, I preferred quiet. My days went back to the way they used to be. Feed runs, fence checks, fixing things that break, because that's what life is: maintenance. Not control, not perfection, just steady hands and time. But every time I passed that north gate, I smiled, because that patch of ground wasn't just grass anymore. It was a memory, a reminder. One evening around sunset, I took a walk out there. The bulls were dozing near the fence, their shadows stretching long across the field. The light painted everything: gold, the grass, the barn, even the dented cooler someone had left behind from the picnic. I stood there for a while, thinking about how strange life is. How it takes something ridiculous, a woman with too much power and too little sense, to remind you who you are. I knelt down, picked up a bit of the trampled grass, and let it crumble through my fingers. People always think revenge feels good, but what really feels good is balance. I didn't hate Karen. Not really. I pitied her. People like that never understand peace. They're too busy trying to dominate it. The truth is, the world doesn't need more people controlling each other. It needs more people minding their own fences. That night, I poured a drink, sat on my porch, and wrote something down in my old notebook. Not for a newspaper, not for court, just for me. Respect is the only crop that never fails. You plant it with boundaries, water it with patience, and harvest it with dignity. Cross that line and you reap what you sow. As the stars came out, Diesel bellowed once from the pasture, a long, deep sound that rolled through the hills like a benediction. "Good night, partner," I said softly. And for the first time in months, I felt like the land and I were breathing in rhythm again. Sometimes in life, it's not the fight that teaches you, it's the fence. Karen's story wasn't just about bulls or trespassing, it was about boundaries. About how people who think rules don't apply to them will always find out one way or another that they do. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: you don't have to shout to be heard, you don't have to fight to win. Sometimes you just need to stand your ground and let truth and a few well-timed bulls do the talking. So if you've ever had someone cross your line, remember, stay calm, stay clever, and trust that karma's got a better aim than anger ever will. Drop your own story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Because here justice doesn't knock twice, it kicks down the gate with 35 bulls behind it.